The comic book industry has been going through a very interesting transition, coming out of the pandemic. And I have a comic book retailer here. Nate Machado used to be the senior manager for New England Comics, worked there for almost 20 years, and he has decided he's stepping away from the comic book industry. And I wanted to kind of pick his brain about the things that he's seen and maybe some of the things that he thinks could get better. How you doing, Nate?
Pretty good. Sunday morning here, so all's well to start the day.
So you worked at New England Comics and worked your way up to senior manager over the course of like 20 years. Were you always a comic book fan? Is this a lifelong dream to like work in the comic book industry?
If you want to look at it, I kind of got hit late with it. I kind of discovered it in my late teens, going into a magazine store that, those used to exist and seeing some stuff on the rack, notably Captain America, where it was the issue that mimicked Avengers 4, except he was the captain on it. And I was like, what do you mean Steve Rogers isn't Captain America? And I grabbed one from there, and I went, and then I just kept going with it and collected. And eventually I worked at, when I got out of school, a small sub-distributor that no longer exists. And then I was unemployed for a while, and then I put an ad in the Comic Buyer's Guide looking for work, and New England Comics called, and I started working for them.
You've been reading comic books since you're a teenager. You've been in the industry for 20 years. Do you still love comic books? Is it that the fire just isn't there for the medium anymore? Why are you stepping away?
I don't know. It's just not there. I mean, it's not there, not because it's not a viable medium, but because it's just a medium that's, with all the billions being made off movies, TV, merchandising, gaming, and all that. In the end, this part of the industry is just never going to, looks like from my view, really get to the level it could for certain reasons. And, I stopped buying several years ago and was just reading the comics necessary to be able to tell my customers what was going on, or when all the new issues would come out, be able to say, yeah, that's good. No, that's crappy. That's not bad. Things like that for sales purposes. But right now I'm really not, I'm not really interested in following it anymore per se. I did read, like Inferno 4 the other day before I left, just to see the end of whatever Hickman had going on with X-Men, because the Krakoa thing was a really cool idea that, it's still a cool idea, but who knows how far it'll go and be good. But yeah, I just kind of, I finally, it's like the other day, I finally went and saw Spider-Man, No Way Home, which was really good, but I didn't rush to the movie theaters to see it, So yeah, I'm kind of burnt. And I've been burnt for a while. I just took a while to finally step away.
It's interesting. We're getting a lot of like kind of conflicting signals about, we're having record growth in the comic book industry, but really it's different sectors. Obviously, you were working with more traditional North American superhero comics, Marvel, DC, Image, that kind of spectrum of comic books that are publishing. What did you see over 20 years? Is the comic industry trending up as far as interest in the characters, in comic books themselves? Is it stagnant? Is it declining right now from your point of view?
The industry crawled out of the gutter in the late 90s and got themselves going in the early 2000s. And they put out some good product then. You got Marvel out of bankruptcy. Joe Quesada came in as EIC, realized what he needed to do. And, the numbers went up and things were really good. We'll say good. And you had a lot of talented guys. And I'm just talking the big two now. We won't get into minutia of small press, but the big two had some really creative people working for them, doing some good stuff. You had Brubaker, Jeff Johns, Billy Tan. You get Bendis comes in and all that, and it was good. But then when you get to about the mid 2000s, some of those guys start to walk away, and talent-wise, talent and all that. And the stories were good, but you didn't have guys coming in really good enough to fill their shoes. Some of the editorial decisions and all that, and then you start locking into variant covers and all that. And what you have right now, in my mind, it's pretty stagnant. I mean, the transaction numbers from when you want to use the main prime days, Wednesday to Sunday, they're about the same for many, many years now. That's part of the thing is like I'm looking, I'm going, I'm doing the same number of transactions. The only reason the money's up is either they raise the prices, I got the variant covers, or the trades and things like that. Mind you, my store sold a lot more merchandise than anybody else in the chain, so that added to the coffers. But the interest is there, but it's all from the media angle. You get a lot of people that come in, look around, and maybe they'll buy a trade and all that. But it's in my mind, it's flat. That's the way I look at it. The store was doing fine, but people too many. For every three people here's my best example. This is how I viewed it. For every three people you get new that come in, four are going out for whatever reason. They're done with it. They're married. They just had some financial thing happen where they can't afford it. And being that you're an entertainment aspect and not something that's necessary in life, like food and all that, and you're paying your rent, you're the easiest thing jettisoned. And someone can always sit down and go, oh, you know what? I want to watch Avengers Endgame on TV. And they can get their Avengers fixed that way. They don't need to read the monthly book or whatever. So I look at it as flat. I look at it as DC is really, really screwed up. Marvel does a little better in my mind. They're not as messed up. The indie part of the industry is not going to save everything. I've heard that before. That never is going to happen because it just don't have that kind of interest level in any kind of indie book like that other than Walking Dead, and that's gone. And, it's, the industry's kind of sputtering. Now, granted, over the decades, that's happened before, but that doesn't mean I have to be part of it.
We're seeing like all this growth, and a lot of it is driven by manga. What I think one of the things that manga does really well is that they identify, the properties that are going to do great. They start out with Shonen Jump, and then they start, those are the books that get released in trades, and the volumes are really easy. They're numbered 1, through 1,000, if there's 1,000 of them, and you know exactly where to start and where to go through it. In the big two, specifically DC and Marvel, they make a trade for everything. Nobody knows where to start with any of these characters anymore. I remember, I started reading later. It took me like 2 or 3 times of going into a comic shop before I actually bought a comic because I was so confused on what the hell I was looking at.
Yes. So to touch those points, yes, manga is back in a growth cycle. It went through its growth cycle early on in late 90s, early 2000s. It had its bust, and now it's come back, and it has several popular series that are either, they're not too far along, like say Chainsaw Man's only got about 8 volumes in, but even something as in-depth as Dragon Ball, Naruto, or say One Piece, which, One Piece is up to 90 something volumes. It is easy to follow because there is only one One Piece series. There is only one Naruto series. There is only one Dragon Ball Z series. Even if the series are done, there's only one. So if you walk in, you go, I want Dragon Ball Z. It's just a matter of, do I have the volumes you need or not? Or have I got to order them. And manga is really, it hits the teen audience and a younger audience, and it resonates. And manga, also, if it's an anime series, that anime series is pumping the crap out of that manga. So if that anime series is popular, a good chunk of those people are gonna go from there and go, oh, I want to go read the manga. In terms of what you said, in terms of Marvel, DC, and the American marketplace, yes, you are very true. Even I had to acknowledge that about running the store for a while. It's like, if you really walked in and started looking around and were a newbie, you'd be like, where do I go? When I walked into that magazine store over 20 years ago and looked on the rack, it was like, okay, there's your section of Marvel Comics, and there it is, and that's it. If you walked into my store and looked at 4 full 10-foot racks of Marvel Comics, there's an X-Men one, there's all the Avengers group together, then there's this, and this, and it's like, where do you start? And the trades are not necessarily as easy either because there's so many volumes. I will give Marvel credit, though. That Epic series line of trades that they do is their best probably thing they've done, and sticking with it was a good idea because at least the Epics start from a 0 point and go forward. And if you want to do that, you can do that. Granted, they're $40 a pop, but you get a hell of a lot of stuff in there. And that's something that DC hasn't figured out yet, that they need a line like that. Even Marvel's even doing the Marvel Masterworks in a mini format where they're $16 a piece and they start from the beginning. Now, they may not run those, for all 300 something, say, issues of an Avengers series, but they are the beginnings and you can sell them. And it's like, I sold a good amount because I go, hey, look, there's the first 10 issues of Spider-Man for $16. You can't buy one page from Amazing Fantasy 15 for $16. So if you want to read Spidey and you want to read it on the cheap in a good format, there you go. There is that aspect. But yeah, in terms of really starting off now, I had to tell people, look, everybody starts from some point. You can't start from the beginning, because it's kind of impossible. Pick a place to start. If you like it, go forward, and then we'll help you backtrack. And that's the best thing I could do, because there is no easy answer unless you can get someone to go, look, here's the latest volume of Avengers. I have #1. There you go. And you can do that. And you can't always do that either, because no one's ordering like it was 30 years ago, where you're ordering to have excess comics like the company used to order X-Men, Avengers, Spidey, excess of every issue to warehouse to then restock the stores with back issues. Well, nobody's doing that anymore. We stopped doing that years ago because the trades came in, and then that devalued the individual nature of some of the comics. So it was like people stopped necessarily buying back issues because they went to trades. That's a whole nother aspect to the industry that makes it difficult, what has value and what doesn't. So, but to speak to your point, yeah, there is that aspect. If you hook into Chainsaw Man as a manga, that's all you need to go and grab. If you get into Spidey, it's like, well, okay, here are the latest 10 issues of Spidey. And then if you want to go earlier, okay, here's what you're in for, or you can do the trades to read certain stories that, maybe the issues are too expensive or whatever, and you can't find them.
Yeah, some of these characters, obviously, you're like almost 50% of all DC comics right now are Batman. I personally love DC. That's the brand I really like. And DC Rebirth was so perfect, but they feel so aimless now. They just like throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And right now, apparently, everything is Batman. It's so frustrating.
I'll give you a good example. And I'll be honest, I was always more Marvel guy because I kind of related better, and I always acknowledge that DC did play the catch-up game to become more like Marvel when they did Crisis Infinite Earths, everything, which was a good idea and all that. Okay, here's the best example of how, I'll be blunt, stupid DC is. They go and do Batman 118 with Joshua Williams on it. Okay, fine, new storylines. Here come the variant covers. What's the homage variant cover on Batman 118? Is it a classic Batman cover to juice people up and go, hey, look, there's a modern artist doing a modern take on a homage cover? No, they did Todd McFarlane's homage to Spider-Man 1. I mean, and it's, what too? It's sold great. Why? Because it's a homage cover of Batman on Spider-Man. Now, I told my customers, what the hell are you doing as DC? You've got 70 years of publishing history on this character. You've got a gazillion covers you could homage with Batman. But when you're in the offices and someone's idea is let's homage a Marvel cover. Marvel Comics would never do that. They would blow their brains out first before they do that, because they know they've got plenty of homage covers to it. And if they did a DC cover, especially if it was in the Joe Quesada era, it would have been purposely to shove a dig into DC and say, ha, 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 look, we did this to you. But yeah, I couldn't believe that. I'm like, you're homaging a Marvel cover on a Batman book to get those extra sales because that homage cover is going to sell better than possibly at one of your Batman homage covers. That's pretty bad in my mind in terms of the mindset at someone in those offices.
Now, what I'm seeing a lot from the viewers of the channel specifically is a lot of frustration with changing mantles on characters, removing kind of the old guard and bringing in a new guard. But now what DC and Marvel are doing specifically is they're just making wholesale changes to the characters. As a retailer, how do you sell people on that? Is that something that people notice? Like, it feels like at least for my viewers, it's a major turnoff when you do something like with what they're doing with the Punisher right now, where they're changing out his logo, which is intrinsically associated with him, or what they're doing with John Kent now that he's been aged up, and they're they've really just changed the character whole cloth, and he doesn't even resemble what Peter J. Tomasi and Dan Jurgens, introduced into Superman not all that long ago.
It has an effect, but it's a short-term effect. Even the people that are long-term customers that, their need to buy that stuff because they've got to have it in the collection because it's another moment in comic time, and all that. It has a limiting effect. And in the end, everybody knows. Everybody. I mean, unless you're completely new to the industry as a reader and all that, you may not. But if you've been doing it long enough, everybody knows that original hero is coming back. And the reason I say that is because they don't go out there and market the other version on some major scale. They don't. They keep marketing throughout the world, North America and all that. Batman is Bruce Wayne, Peter Parker is Spider-Man, all that. So all those little changes they do, it ends up being a zero-sum gain, I guess you could say. It's one thing if you've got an interesting story. Say like when Ed Brubaker, when he did Captain America, he brings Bucky back as the Winter Soldier, he kills Cap, and then Bucky steps in and it becomes Cap. That is a good story and it's interesting. It's like, okay, what is Bucky going to do? How is he going to play this role? What is going to come from it? Son of Superman with John Kent, I don't care. And this, when number 5 came out with the big Kiss issue, yeah, we jacked up orders. Did it sell out? No, it didn't. And that tells you right there that, if you don't get a sellout on that, who cares? And replacing these characters with other characters, especially in the environment we're in now. I'll just use the word environment. A lot of people, especially me, see it as though it's just placating somebody on some place down the line who wants to see this because they think it's a better idea to broaden the base and all that and everything. And it doesn't work. It never works. You can make Green Lantern a woman or not. If it stinks, it stinks. And in the end, everybody, wants to see Hal Jordan or Guy Gardner or whatever. It just boils down to that. There's too much history. So, when you go with killing off characters, they killed Wolverine. Well, everybody kind of knew that he's going to come back because it's Wolverine. It's a money-making cash machine for the company. Now, how long he's gone depends on how well the story they do with him gone does. If it doesn't do well, guess what? They pull the reins back, say, we're done with this, kick in the story and get him back. It'll be the same thing with these substitutions, And one other thing on the John Kent thing, DC, again, they've got the most iconic, oldest superhero, the linchpin, the prototype for everything that came from it in Superman. And they can't sell Superman. What is your problem? It's not that difficult. You know what I mean? For crying out loud, you don't have to go that far back in time. Go back to the 80s when they had three weekly Superman titles. You had Dan Jurgens, Brett Breeding, a really solid crew, and told those stories, and everybody dug it. I'm not saying you get those same sales, but if you tell good Superman stories, people will buy Superman. And you don't need to change the Truth, Justice, and the yada, yada, yada logo, even though that was never originally part of the character, but it is part of the character now. After a while, some things stick. And that's a good example of things. Like I said, I believe, like I said, I'm under the belief that, part of what they did with that was to maintain that if they ever lost the character of Superman, they would have a Superman. That couldn't be taken away from. So there's John Kent. Can't take that away from us. But, it's not rocket scientist. These characters have been around for decades. They've been in media. Everybody acknowledges them. And in the media aspect, they keep these characters out there in movies and television and merchandise. This is what works. And the only reason to do a substitution is if you've got an interesting story. And I'll use another example. When they did when Steve Rogers became the captain and stopped being Captain America, when Mark Gruenwald was writing the series, that was a really good story, and it was a good point. Can somebody else be Captain America or not? And that was the story to tell, and there was a reason for it. Not we want to make a female Captain America because we think we can appeal to some females who read the book, and because we need to be more inclusive and all that, which are terrible reasons to substitute a character, because that's not going to make anybody read something. So
Yeah, they're
I
superficial.
see it as a zero-sum game because in the end, they always are going to come back to those characters because they've been ingrained for decades and there's no way to displace them unless you get really, really lucky with a new character that can come in and slide in and be taken by the audience that they want it and they want to keep it.
So, Nate, I do want to talk a little bit about the things that have happened, since the pandemic shutdown happened. Before that, we pretty much had a monopoly on comic book distribution. Now, DC Comics has their distributor, Lunar. Marvel's with Penguin Random House. Image is stuck, or a lot of the independents is stuck with Diamond. Has this been a net gain? Has this been a positive? Did this end up being a value add?
No, it's not, because this is the reality of it. DC is just still distributed by one distributor, Lunar. That's it. The other company, they had two to start with. The other company is gone. They're not using them. So you got to go to Lunar to get your DC. Now you have a slight ability with Marvel to go to Random House, or you can stay with Diamond and still get your Marvel. You don't have to switch. And yes, you get all your small press from Diamond, but it's still basically two companies with their hands around everybody's neck going, this is it. I mean, what would really be a game changer is if someone came in like it used to be, where at least you had Capital and Diamond, both distributing both everybody, whereas a retail, you can go, look, you're not servicing my needs. I'm going to go here if you don't address the problem. Okay? Because all it ends up being for like New England Comics is more work. Now you have one shipment being delivered with your DC stuff that you got to break down and all that and count up and make sure everything's there. Then you got to go get your Marvel and all that, break that down, count it up, blah, 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 and break it down. So it's now, you got a couple more bills. You're not doing any less work. You're almost doing more work. And then if you have a problem, now your DC problem, and some people don't know this, there's no more reps. Like DC, when they used to have Diamond, you would have a rep. And if you had a problem, you could go to your rep and the rep could lean on Diamond and go, what's the problem here? Why isn't this being done? Or what's the situation? You don't have that anymore. If you go to DC and say, I got a problem, they go, hey, it's a third-party vendor now, man. We don't have anything. You got to talk to them. So you got to hope that Lunar does the job that you need, So it doesn't really change the matter. The biggest problem the industry has, and I'll slide this in, is that this not necessarily, even on the distribution, it's not that you can't get the product. The biggest problem the industry have is that this is all still low-level retailing. You got properties and all that are worth millions to billions of dollars, and you got an industry counting on one little store here, one little store there, selling it through the direct market with no national distribution. That's the real problem that everybody thought the direct market was going to solve years ago, and it didn't, because when the market collapsed, that was it. And the amount of stores in the U.S. has never changed. I know this isn't exactly the answer to the question you asked, but it's something else that needs to be addressed that I've said in the store. I've said to people, that's the big problem. This stuff needs to be out there more disposable so people can get at it, as opposed to treating every issue that comes out like it's going to be some fine collectible you're going to retire on in 50 years, which ain't going to happen. But in defining this question, no, it's a zero-sum game with what happened with distribution, in my mind.
But you did lose discounts, right? Because now you have to go through 3 distributors. So Diamond might not have been doing a great job. I've heard a lot of complaints, but you did get good discounts on the product if you had bigger orders.
If you don't know this, Marvel trimmed their discounts back. When they went to Random House, they cut their discounts back.
Yeah.
So that was
that's one of the things that people lost.
Everybody wants bigger discount. There was talk about in the company when that was going down that there might have to be some changes made in terms of what the company did. Even though I'm not there anymore, there were no changes that came, so it must have been good enough. You know what I mean? But I will say this with the Random House thing, I did look at it as Marvel attempting, possibly the publisher, to try and reach out to new venues, because Random House as a book distributor reaches other places that Diamond wouldn't. And
absolutely,
that someone might have put the screws to Marvel and said, look, you're doing okay, but we need to make more money here, and you need to find ways to do it. And that's what I view the Random House thing was, is trying to get more stuff out there. Yeah, cut back on the discount, but try and make more money. Because, there's always that rumor out there that, they're going to stop doing this publishing stuff because it doesn't make money. DC having that rumor basically lorded over its head the longest. and there's some, that who knows, there could be possibilities to that. But if you try and get to the product into more venues, that's one way to try and make more money.
This will be like my last question here, Nate. Just about the pandemic once again. The comic retailers I've personally talked to that seem to have been doing the best were kind of prepared for it because they had e-commerce set up. Another subset of comic retailers that are doing really good have really jumped in on the speculator game. It's lots of store variant covers, exclusive variant, getting high into those ratio variants and whatnot. And the other, seems to be the secret sauce is really going in heavy on back issues. Is it healthy that all these retailers have to find these specific gimmicks just to move comic books in spite of what DC and Marvel are doing? Is that what you saw with New England Comics, that there was a big transition during the pandemic, and you really have to be ready for these things and be fully embraced into e-commerce and stuff?
Yeah, you should. And unfortunately, that's one aspect of the company that really doesn't exist. And it's part of the reason why I'm no longer there, because there's not much forward thinking beyond selling stuff in the stores. In terms of the variant cover thing, the company tried a few of those at one point. We did a Libre Meggio variant on Batman Rebirth 1 that did well. And then we did a couple of clunkers that, they were lousy artists and they weren't on books that cared, and the things don't sell. If you're a retailer and you're really hooked up well with it and you can make a good variant cover that people will pay for and you can sell it, great. I'm still my store sold the most variant covers out of all the stores in the chain. I just had a natural audience for it. So it's an aspect to the industry that's a positive to a certain extent, but you got to be wary, because if
there's a lot of risk,
some guys start. What was that?
There's a lot of risk involved with the variant covers you're doing the store exclusive, because there's a minimum order at DC and Marvel. So it's a large financial investment. And if you have a clunker, you're eating it.
Yep, you are. You are eating it. Having sold many variants through the store, there are still a lot of variants that you eat, because there's only so much money to go around. And some of these variants, some of them you get, they're like, that's not really a great variant. You get it you get it to get it, but it's like you're gonna, especially the small press companies are the worst for this. Dynamite and all that. They think they're gonna make these ton of variants and sell them, and a lot of times they ain't worth that much money. And the excess ones, you put them in the dollar bin and say, see you later, because nobody's gonna pay $4 or $5 for a series, especially if the series went nowhere. All you're gonna get is the person that thinks it's a cool cover, and they'll add it into their collection for $1. And I say that having sold. I sold House of Slaughter #1. I had customers who wanted the 1 in 1,000, so I sold a 1 in 1,000 House of Slaughter 1. I've done that and all that, but I know the flip side of that, the other side of it. You got to be real careful with it, because I've lost guys because they buy these variant covers, and then 6 months later they're not worth as much as that they paid for them, and they get kind of aggravated. I'm trying to tell them, dude, you got to look the long term. You know what I mean? This is an open marketplace. It's going to fluctuate. If you pay $20 for it and it's worth 10 or 12 now, but 5 years from now it could be worth $80. This is the game you play with this. So that's something that people, retailers and collectors, got to keep in mind, and the company's got to keep in mind. Sometimes a little less is more. Like I said, I think there's already too many out there, and all that, and it still works to a certain degree. But the thing is too is that you got guys that are buying multiple copies of the same issue for the covers. So you're not selling 4 covers to 4 different people, which are 4 customers. You're selling 4 copies to 1 customer. Okay, you're not really growing the pie there. You just get more money out of one person, which means there's some other book you might put out that he ain't gonna buy, because guess what? He's too much of an X guy, a Batman guy, or a Spider-Man guy, where he's like, no, I have to be completionary like this, as opposed to you just put out this new comic you want him to buy, you think it's good, and he's like, yeah, I'm not going to buy that because I don't have the money for it, or I'm doing this, So it's, it's a dubious thing.
So I do want to say thank you very much to Nate Machado, former senior manager from New England Comics. Is there anything else that you wanted to say, about your time there and stepping away from the industry?
Yeah, it's just something I don't want to do anymore. The people that are there are nice people. The company is it's a stable company. It's the largest retailer in Massachusetts. It's been around a lot of years, and I suggest if you're a fan and everything, you're in Massachusetts, go. You'll more than likely find what you need. And it's something I'm just not going to do anymore. But the company is still there, and they'll move on without me. And uh, that's about. I guess that's about all I should probably say, just to keep it all nice.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
All right, man. I appreciate it too.